Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. When a public figure begins insulting a reporter, calling them stupid, piggy, or even worse, what should a journalist do in that moment? Pause, press on, walk out? Should journalists call out the insult on air or in print and treat it as part of the story, or ignore it and stay focused strictly on the substantive issues? Does responding to insults risk amplifying the attacker's message, or is silence a kind of surrender that undercuts press credibility? How do journalists balance the need to hold a public official accountable when asking tough and sometimes uncomfortable questions? They always run the risk of provoking personal attacks or demeaning language. And what are the ethical responsibilities of news organizations when their reporters are targeted by refusing them access to that public official? How far should they go to support that journalist? We're talking about all of these issues tonight because, of course, this is actually what is happening in real time. My guests are Jennifer Thomas, Howard University journalism professor and director of the Annenberg Honors Program, and Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent for the American Urban Radio Network. Ladies, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Ebony, maybe I should make sure that I get your official title, the obnoxious Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent.
And to that I say, I am not obnoxious.
Thank you so much. And listen, for those of you who are wondering why I made that reference, we're going to start off with an old favorite of the president.
Is it an old favorite now?
Yeah,
already?
this is certainly an old favorite, and then we'll come back and we will talk about it.
Mr. President, when are you going to give me?
We're going to be going into New York too,
Mr. President,
and we're going to be going in quiet. You're really obnoxious.
I'm not obnoxious, but I'm trying to ask you, what about your plans
You are
for
really
Memphis?
obnoxious.
I'm not obnoxious, but I
Okay.
am asking, what are your plans for Memphis? Many people want
I'm not going to
know
talk
what
to
the
you
numbers are
until I
gonna be.
call on you.
What are your plans for Memphis?
So, who
Mr.
else? Yeah,
President?
go ahead.
Just bringing back a few memories for you there.
Only but goodie.
Yeah, how about that? We are also joined by Raquel Martin, who is Washington correspondent for Nexstar. Raquel, thank you so much for joining the conversation as well.
Yeah, glad to join.
Absolutely. You came in when we were just having a bit of a White House flashback with Ebony McMorris after her tangling with President Trump. But all jokes aside, this is a very, very serious situation. Ebony, in that moment, can you remind us how you were feeling? And did you ever feel that you needed to specifically address it beyond just giving the president pushback? Give us your thought.
In the moment, I just felt insulted, and we've all seen the president attack so many people through the years, and I think many reporters kind of have a running tab in their head of what they're going to say, whether it's going to be a long Easter speech or something quick or just ignore it. In the moment, it feels a lot different because you understand the weight of the room that you were in, and that happened exactly in the Oval Office with Poole, and you're live on TV. But just reactively, I had to say no. I had determined, I know whatever I was going to say, but I know I'm not going to let you just sit up and insult. And some reporters, I'll say this because I've heard this, some people actually take it almost as a badge of honor. I don't know how much now, but before I've heard reporters say, guess what, the president did and did you say anything back? And you just let that happen? Oh, okay. And I think that it's tragic when we keep allowing someone to play in our face. It doesn't mean that I become the story, because I'm not necessarily what you want to happen, but how do you get called piggy and not become the story? You know what I'm saying? And we've seen presidents over the years confrontations, but nothing like this when it comes to reporters. And so in that moment, I did say to myself, just get to the question, go back to what's happening in Memphis, because at that time and still now, we were looking at streets being militarized, and there was a huge pushback. And if I kept talking and made it about me, I would never get to Memphis, which he never commented on. I think insisting and going back to the question, still knocking him down, puts the topic out there. What are you doing in Memphis? And he does it so much now, it's not even shock value. It is like, how low can you go? The piggy was, I was, when he called that girl piggy, I was like, but I remember what he said about Rosie O'Donnell, what he said about Hillary Clinton. So he's not below it. It's not beneath it.
Let me ask you this, Jennifer, because and for people who know, you and I go way back, not only in local television news, but your work as a professor here at Howard University. When you've had those conversations with journalism students about these kinds of issues, what do you tell them?
Well, first, thank you for having me. It's always good to be here with you and with all these ladies here. Well, it's a great question, because this is an issue that we see. A lot of, as students at an HBCU, we're approaching journalism under our lens, because we do have somewhat of a different lens of often being, like, as Ebony is, sometimes the only person that looks like us in the room. So, they're seeing these things happen, and their first reaction is to strike back. Of course, right? So, I love how Ebony responded in that moment, saying, no, I'm not obnoxious, and getting to the question. Because we know that when the president does this, he's trying to distract from what the real issue is, as he did in that case, and as he always does. So what we always tell the students, or what I always tell my students, I actually created, we have a lecture called Reporting While Black, ironically. It came out of this from 2020 in his first administration, when we were seeing the barrage of attacks against more particularly Black women of color. We have so few of us now that it's just women journalists in general and journalists in general. So we tell them to stick what they are there to do. But I think, Ebony, your case is a prime example, but you do have a right to respond. I mean, and those of us in our culture know, my dad used to say, when someone insults you, try to turn the cheek once, twice, and the third time, pick up a brick. So, but so much you can take. And so there's a line of being respected. But for someone holding that highest office in the land, it's difficult, because you want to respect the office, but then the person is being disrespectful. So staying true to what their role is in that moment, and what our role is as journalists. And that's generally what I give as examples of what other reporters in that same situation have said, in terms of how they reacted, that they were staying focused on what their mission was.
Raquel, what are your thoughts about this? First of all, have you ever had an elected official personally attack you, say in a press conference or during the course of an interview? And secondly, whether that happened or not, what do you believe would be, as a journalist, the appropriate response?
I've been thinking about this often, because the president has been increasing his direct insults towards reporters. What would I do if I was in that predicament? And it's really unclear exactly how to navigate that situation, because Ebony kind of brought up the dilemma that you're in. You don't want to be the story. And half the time, this is a sidetrack. You're asking questions that people actually need to know the answers to. So part of me just would want to stay on that. But it feels as if, as a collective, there should be some sort of reckoning with how the president is treating the press. So hopefully, as this continues, maybe we huddle together as a media to figure out when is enough, because I don't know how much we're going to keep laughing off or brushing aside something that has not been the norm before. Personally, I have not been in that predicament with the president. I have been in situations with people in his administration who have posed questions to, and I know they don't like the question. In the previous administration, Kellyanne Conway was very quick about saying something snarky towards you back, and that was personal as she answered your question. So it usually be something condescending. I cover Capitol Hill a lot. And I would say lawmakers are still have a certain amount of formality to them. But I have run into occasions where I am interviewing a lawmaker who may not like my line of questioning and have tried to just rip off their mic and dodge me in hallways, had their press people come and talk to me about my questions. One accused me of being up to something, which I'm not really understanding because I was asking.
Up to journalism.
Yeah, like she was like, I know what you're doing. And I'm like,
journalism.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I guess I'm navigating a similar tone on the Hill, but the president is in a league of his own when it comes to how he is talking to press.
Mm-hmm. I do remember, I think the very first time that something like that actually happened to me it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away in Columbus, Ohio, where a Black member of the city council would not agree to a sit-down interview. And so as we were doing a lot back then, I don't know if we're doing so much of it now, but kind of that 60-minute-esque style where you track them down as they got out of their car. And I do remember asking him questions, and he was, let us say, extremely taken aback and miffed by the aggressive style of my questioning.
Yeah.
But with that said, I will say this: I did get a lot of pushback from the Black community for that interview. Suffice it to say that he later was discovered to have been doing some underhanded things.
Don't they always, Harold? Isn't that like the ones that act like that?
There's always something
that they're running.
There's always that. But I think this is less about, at least this part of the conversation, less about what they say and more about how we react. Because for those of us who have been doing this a really, really long time, I guess we expect some sense of pushback, the invectives, colorful metaphors launched at us. And I will say, and Jennifer, you can help me with this, I think the ground was set even all the way back to the Nixon administration, when Woodward and Bernstein were attacked from the podium by Richard Nixon.
Absolutely. And that's another case that we look at when in class now, when we talk about journalism ethics, because the students now may not understand, how the history of this in this country. And as you know, and everyone on this panel knows, there has not usually been a cozy relationship between the president and the press. We are in these rooms for a reason. We're there to defend the public's right to know, to ask those tough questions they may not want to be answered. And so when a person hits back like that, we know there's a reason behind it, because they don't want to share or to answer the questions that we've been asked. The difference, as you noted, Nixon was remarkable, but this president has gone to a whole new low. And, on a world stage, not just on the national stage, because I think the public is seeing what's happening, but this isn't the first time we've had this. I do say, and Ebony and Raquel, you may have another take on it, but I know in the first administration, it did seem that we saw reporters pushing back. It seemed more. I think people seem to be a little more, almost more, because it's so routine, maybe it's ignored more, but then also the press and social media outlets too were much more outspoken in banning him and not caring what he had to say when they were, just except for C-SPAN sometimes, because he was, saying so many lies on camera. And you saw the Jim Acostas and the Don Lemons and others kind of starting. We're not seeing that as much this time around. Maybe because he's allowed so many more far right members of the press in and blocked many others out. I don't know.
Yeah, I need to stop you for just a moment, because we're going to lose Raquel in just a moment, and I wanted her to have a final word. And also, I need to mention the loss of one of our colleagues. But Raquel, I'll let you have a final word on this issue quickly, please.
Oh, got it. And I'm sorry, I do have to run off
That's
because
quite all right. Please
I
go right
am
ahead.
on
Yeah.
deadline. But just piggybacking on the conversation as a whole, I am interested to see how the press is going to navigate the next 3.5 years. We have, or not half, almost 3 years now. We have a lot more time with this president. I'm not sure if the rhetoric will tone down coming up to the midterms, after the midterms. It's unclear what could actually make this president pivot his strategy. And now we're seeing it on the White House website. There is that page designated to members of the media that they believe are circulating inaccurate information. That is really subjective because the objective truth is what it is. So it's a heightened situation, and I am alarmed. Governor DeSantis had a similar strategy in Florida. We were hearing anecdotally from colleagues that were covering his administration down there, how they were being targeted, attacked, their screenshots shared online. I'm hoping it doesn't elevate to that, but right now the trajectory we're on is concerning, and I know the administration doesn't seem to have much respect for the White House press corps. The White House Correspondents Association has tried to have some reckoning. There's now lawsuits with the DOD, people not being able to access.
I've got to. I'm really low on time, and I appreciate you coming in and sharing your experiences and your expertise. But before we go to a break, we would be remiss if we did not mention the passing of one of our friends and colleagues, Washington Informer reporter James Wright. He passed away recently. He was a frequent voice here on the Daily Drum. He was committed to truth-telling, sharing the truth, obviously, and embodying what it means to be a real newsman. James Wright with the Washington Informer. He will truly be missed. We're going to take a break. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next. We'll be back on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a bit. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about the Trump administration's attack on journalists and journalism. My guests are Jennifer Thomas, Howard University journalism professor and director of the Annenberg Honors Program, and Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent for the American Urban Radio Network. I do want to go back to something that I found particularly disturbing, and because I have two women journalists here, I want to get your take on this. We could not use the piggy comment that the president used against a reporter when she was asking him about the Epstein files. The reason we can't is because the audio is really bad.
Yeah,
he's on Air Force One, and there's a lot of noise. But what I do want you to speak to is the response that White House press spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said in defense of the president.
What did the president mean when he called a reporter piggy? Look, the president is very frank and honest with everyone in this room. You've all seen it yourself. You've all experienced it yourselves. And I think it's one of the many reasons that the American people reelected this president, because of his frankness. And he calls out fake news when he sees it. He gets frustrated with reporters when you lie about him, when you spread fake news about him and his administration. But he also is the most transparent president in history.
Jennifer, I'll start with you. Just as a woman journalist, hearing Caroline Leavitt defend these sexist, misogynistic comments, talk to me about what I, as a man, I cannot speak to.
Well, it was very disheartening. I would say it's not really though surprising because of her track record. But to have a woman support such abhorrent language aimed at another woman, period, is beyond the pale to me. But it says and it shows, I think, where many people in his circle are. But for her to be the press secretary of the United States and representing the president, for that to come out of her mouth is an aberration. It's ridiculous. It's sad and it's terrible. But it shows, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, that, a lot of the people now in this administration, as we've seen from her response and others, they're almost just lapdogs to whatever the president is going to say. And they're just blindly supporting it and defending it. What I am seeing recently now is more congressional members on both sides of the aisle speaking out against that comment in particular, and others of late that he's saying. Now they're still supporting him, but at least they're calling these things out. And I think it's going to take more of that, but it really should start with the press secretary saying, even, as a personal point of reference, she could have spoken out against it. So those are my thoughts.
Ebony, do you believe that that's true? Do you think that she would have been able to speak out about it, or at least color it in a way that may have been more sensical as a woman? I can't quite.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, I can't see how she would have been able to address that from the podium. I mean, what is she supposed to say? Yes, my boss is a sexist and he's a misogynist, and I don't like it. But that would have probably been the last day we saw her.
I'm not even going to try to give her words. I'm going to say this. This is his second rodeo. Okay. He is who he was and who he has been. Caroline Leavitt said what she wanted to say and is a part of an administration she wants to be a part of because she believes that she's 10 toes down in it. And what she said to me that was truth is that people liked it. People voted for this man because they liked his brashness. They liked his harshness. They felt like he spoke like those who did vote for him. They forgave him so many times. There have been many times when people could have course corrected on how they felt about this president. He has talked about people's wives, people. This is who he has been. He has been showing you. So those who now are part of this administration wanted to be that it's what they also believe. Look, you talked earlier about Nixon having an enemies list. Mm-hmm. The president said he has had an enemies list. When he was stomping and campaigning and people were going into rural America and asking, what is it that you like about him? But he says this and he says that they were forgiving. You know why? Because they didn't think that they were going to be affected by the policies that he was going to bring down the line. So now they having to deal with the fallout from this one big beautiful bill, but he was telling you all along in his language and what his character was. He was showing you that he lies. He was showing you that he doesn't care. This isn't the first time that they have made statements, defending the president's actions and what he has said, the outright outlandish things that he has said and insulting things, and then they also throw rocks and hide their hands because then they don't like, well, this is what you said about him. You've called him fascist. I mean, this president, some of the things that he has said that we don't even talk about sometimes are just, look, what about they're eating cats and dogs? Here's the difference with this administration, I believe, because we've seen, look, Bush has had his moments with press. Obama's had his moments with press. I think the difference is in this, especially in this social media day and age, is that we have seen, just look at January 6th, when this president speaks, those that follow him, right, that are willing to act on command, it is dangerous. When I had my incident, I had several reporters call me and say, do you have security? Mm-hmm. Because they understand that when he speaks, and we have seen him things, people act on it. Social media goes on the attack. I mean, it is vicious. That's the viciousness. I've had people attack me before that have been in politics. Some in Prince George's County didn't like what I said, but it didn't go past that.
Right.
Sometimes it made a little story. But when Obama had his on reporters, you didn't see people like running for their lives. And so speaking up, the question is, what is the cost people may feel like they have to pay? Maybe I'll just let it go and stick to the story. But there is power. I think the issue is how we deal with it. WHCA has tried to do pushback with statements and words. It's kind of fallen flat. It's fallen short, right? And so he keeps going at it. And I'm telling you, this is, I believe it's the tip of the iceberg of what he's going to say. We've heard him saying about other countries, as whole countries. He's
saying it now about Somalia.
He's saying it now about Somalia, and his words, his insults, you got to know that there's some type of policy that he's trying to create behind it. So if I can get you to think this about this group of people, if I can on my Truth Social site call out Letitia James, put out people's addresses and feed, and it's like give red meat to my base, they'll carry out what I want. Isn't he the one who said that he could shoot somebody in the middle of
get away with it?
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Tiffany, to your point. Do you have security?
So yes, this is a conversation I had before he got in office, with someone, just my household, just my family, just my friends. Like, what do we do just in case I gotta one day just push all the way back, or say something, or ask a question that they don't like. And so I have someone reach out to me. So we have some things. I'm not gonna put my business out there.
Yeah.
But I'm okay. But it is still, you have to weigh the cost, because even if it's not the security issue, people's livelihood.
Yeah,
right?
but I'm going to stick with that point.
The safety issue.
Yeah, the safety issue, because as we all know, your predecessor at AURN, April Ryan, had a serious security issue after the press conference, the president's first press conference during his very first term, where there was that clash between April Ryan and the president. And suffice it to say, there was no name calling there. One could say objectively that was, the president, challenging her and not really understanding how Congress works and how the relationship between reporters and the people that they cover work. That's a whole different conversation. But that was certainly a clash, but he wasn't calling her names even then. But of course, the people who follow him threatened her. And we know that she did have to acquire a security. My question through all of that for you and Jennifer, what responsibility do you believe that the journalistic organization that you work for has to have to protect you while you're doing your job, if necessary?
Ooh, that's a layered question. So, but you go.
I was just going to say, from my experience, and of course I'm on the broadcast side, so from NBC and CNN and even in local news, that when I was actively involved full time, this wasn't an issue, because as we know, the press pass protected you in spaces wherever you were, and now it's a target. So absolutely, I feel that the outlet has a duty to really protect those that are out there representing that organization for the public and the greater good. They have that's something that they should be required to do, and they should do, because of the times we're in. Listen, I've been blessed to be able to literally travel around the world to talk about this very topic of press freedom. And I remember being in Lithuania, out of all places, and having a private meeting with Russian journalists, who literally escaped for their lives from Belarus to talk about the importance of press freedom, to meet with African journalists in Nigeria who had been attempted at kidnapping. Like, I've talked to so many journalists around the world who've literally put their lives at risk. Never in a million years would I think we would be in this conversation where a reporter like Ebony would have to talk about having to get security for doing her job in the U.S. as a certified qualified journalists covering the White House, a credentialed journalist. This is really a sad state of affairs that we're in as a country where press freedom is the fundamental of what we do.
Yeah, you're talking about security and what role you believe
Station should play.
organizations have.
It's a tough question. I would say April was one of the first people to call me and remind me of her story and open up to some things that she didn't always talk about publicly that she had to deal with and talk about with her family, because it was a serious moment. It literally changed a lot of her movement, and she has children, right? And so you also have to think about that. For news outlets, of course, my boss and I immediately had a conversation because April was here before. She was at WHUR-FM. So my company had been through this before and talked with me extensively. The challenges, especially for Black media, and April and I are only two Black women journalists in there. That budgeting issue you're talking about, Black media already right now, we're facing budget woes just like many others, but it's that much more, right? We talk about the cold and the flu analogy. And so it's a challenge. And I think that's why I'm saying I have seen some journalists say, I'm not going in that room to cover them. I'm going to cover him from a different angle. I don't see as many not that there was a whole bunch anymore, but most of the time the coverage that you're seeing Black owned and operated, we're just doing it from a different angle. Larger outlets have that budget. They're in the travel press pool to do that. Like, the expense of that is really serious. And I think that's also why you have some reporters who maybe don't push back as much as people would want them to, because that's a budgeting issue for the station. Like, let's just be real. It's a numbers game. It's a budgeting issue for them. Doesn't mean you don't tell truth, but there are other ways to do it. It also means I'm not going to peddle in the insults going back and forth with you, but I am going to put truth out there. Now, you can wrestle with the truth, Mr. President, all you want to. So I'm not going to go back in the insults. I mean, it's that's why I was like, it's very layered. But one thing, as I always think about Ida B. Wells.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
I ain't seeing nobody literally physically hanging from no tree right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I can think about her story and how she pressed forward, and we would not really understand lynching if it had not been for her work, right? Her fearless work. You talking about somebody who needed security. So that stories like that push me even more, or even Allison Dunnigan, who had to speak out in that room and was ignored for years, wasn't even asked a question. And so it's not that what we're going through, what April didn't go through, isn't major. It's just that we have to draw from the past and figure out how we navigate that future. And that could be, because WHCA I asked about this. I said, what are we going to do? I literally said, can we come together as journalists and come back and speak out? And he said, Evan, you got to understand, you are not here representing yourself. Mm-hmm. Everybody is representing a network with a different budget and a different objective, and everybody is not willing to do that. So I had to leave it alone.
Yeah. And I think there is a difference between covering, say, the White House or Capitol Hill, for example, or covering public officials and this issue of the personal safety of a reporter, of journalists. I have not had to deal with that, I will say, and again, this is back to the Jennifer Thomas, Harold Fisher professional connection, where there were times in deep Alabama, where I was warned, and from. I will just say, a sheriff warned me, and he was, and this was not a malicious thing. He said to me that this is a sundown town. Here is my phone number,
baby.
He said, but I cannot guarantee that I or any of my deputies will always be available to protect you. because I don't have enough deputies. And so it was a warning. It was not a threat. He said, so make sure that you protect yourself when I am not within a quick, few minutes away with a phone call. But then there were others, Jennifer, where there were literal threats from other members of the community. And I'm not just pointing out Alabama. This happened in other states where I work, in Florida and in Missouri, just because I was a Black man on the air reporting the news.
And absolutely. And, these are conversations, especially with our young journalists starting in the industry, where you're going to go on spaces and you may be the youngest, the only Black person, the only woman. I've certainly had those experiences. And like you said, then, come upon the racism, the sexism, all the other isms, right? What do you do? And how do you speak out? And how do you protect yourself? This is why organizations, for those that are listening, that are not in our industry, why organizations such as the National Association of Black Journalists and us are so important, because and people question, well, why do you need something that's different? Well, why do you need it? Listen to this conversation, right? We have to have a collective agency so that we can have a soft place to land, so that we can have a support. But back to the same issue that Ebony mentioned earlier, it's a budgetary thing. We can write letters and make statements all we want, but the situation, as long as we have social media networks and people can get behind these laptops and computers and speak racism and hatred, there's going to be a need to step up and do more to protect those of us who are just doing our job by letting people know what's going on in America.
I do, excuse me, I want to, since you brought up NABJ, I did want to go back to July of last year, and I want both of you to talk about this. And I'm sure both of you were there at the NABJ convention when then candidate Trump was questioned on stage. And there's a specific reason. It's a little long, but it helps with the context of my next question.
I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe Black district attorneys. You've attacked Black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking Black supporters to vote for you, why should Black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the Black population of this country. I've done so much for the Black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for Black workers and Black entrepreneurs.
As I said, it was long, but it's really important to talk about the context of that, Ebony. And I guess my question is there a line between tough journalism and provocative or antagonistic interviewing or questions, Ebony?
Woo, that question actually was a question that many journalists were talking about after that. Some of us were like, Rachel, nail him, get him. Others, the conversation, people were like, well, why would she come and say it like that? She didn't say hello. Let me just say this, and you, Professor, you can correct me. I feel like the day of journalism is changing.
Yes,
and
it has.
it's a conversation and struggle that I'm even having within myself, because sometimes I'm like, look, this administration who has changed the game on politics, period. The niceties have slightly gone out the window, and I'm like, there's a new game in town. There's a new way of doing business, and some of the hi hello thing is out the door. I think the question that she asked, she got it in. That was the one opportunity, because I was surprised that he came. So backstory, many people weren't sure he was going to be there. So when you get him, let's just go ahead and get it all out. She caught flack for saying it and for not doing it another way. But many of us were cheering her on in that. I think she came hard hitting, and I think she did it in the right way and put it out on the table. I don't care what she would have asked. Yep. If she would have said hello before it. We understand the president that we have and what his campaign was about. I don't need to, I'm gonna just cut to the chase. I didn't have a problem with it, honestly, at all. I liked it.
And Jennifer?
Yeah, I would say, where's the lie?
Right.
I mean, she came right in, our former NABJ baby. I was when she was in NABJ student projects. And Rachel, to your point, to what Ebony said, you cannot, you have to consider the source. So when you're preparing to interview someone, you look to see what the person is, what their interview style is, how you're going to get into a lot of those topics. And to her point, I don't think there would have been any other way that she would have asked the question that he would not have given some type of similar response. I also think some of the nuance with it, there were also conversations about why was she the reporter? She had the stripes for it because she was the White House. Wasn't she then at the time still White House correspondent? However, she's very young in her career, and there were other male or even more senior journalists who he may not have reacted to as harshly as he does to female journalists. So those were other questions I think that people were having behind the scenes. But I think considering all of that, and she's known for getting in a press conference and asking Putin.
She said, "What are you afraid of?"
Absolutely. So that's her style.
That's her style.
And as a journalist, you sometimes have to ask the tough question. There's no right or wrong way to skin the cat. I think that she did what she thought was best for the person who she was interviewing. And I thought she did a sound job with that question.
I mean, how many ways can you ask someone, why do you say racist things? Because that's basically like, let me just give you all of the, how do you nicely say, you know what I mean?
Right. And you can't tiptoe around that.
We see you, we hear you. These are the things that you said. I'm not going to let you play in my face. And you had also the reporter from Fox that was on the stage as well. And she actually kind of stuck up for Rachel in some ways. So, I mean, the journalism is changing. It really is.
I mean, it is. You're absolutely right. I'm literally writing a book chapter about that, about how we're changing the notion of objectivity, and based on what we are seeing happening as people of color and as journalists of color, and calling a spade a spade.
Yes.
So you have to come out and say they're lies. You've said this. That's the truth. Now, could she have started off and said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Trump"? Perhaps.
And then you still would have ended up at the same place.
Correct. That was
what still would have gone off on her. He still would have, had a woe is me.
Yes.
And and I'm not saying everyone always goes back to the Michelle Obama quote when she said, when they go low,
we go high.
And people are like, bump that. I'm going lower. There are some places I don't think that we should go. There should be some integrity there should be integrity in our work, but it does not mean that I can't come at you hard. And if I say hello before I do it, or goodbye at the end. Yeah.
Do I say hello before I punch you in the mouth?
Right.
But that's why we said, where was the lie? I mean, those were the questions people want to know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Ladies, thank you so very, very much. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Ebony, good to see you. Jennifer,
you too.
Always a pleasure. Ebony McMorris and Jennifer Thomas, thank you again so much. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, December 4th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.